2 targets with 1 bomb. The Ukrainian armed forces blew up a Russian infantry position and an ammunition depot in the southern direction. The target was detected by Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance, which quickly relayed the coordinates to the Air Force. The crew of a MiG-29 fighter jet delivered a precise strike using a French high-precision Hammer aerial bomb. As a result, the enemy's arsenal was destroyed and their personnel eliminated. Ukrainian defenders also blew up 3 more Russian field depots in the Kupiansk direction. The soldiers say it was a real jackpot, since the depots stored the Russian occupiers' fuel and lubricants, ammunition, and even food supplies.
And all of that was taken out by just one little FPV drone. Of course, it couldn't handle the excitement from such a variety and literally exploded with happiness. You could say we unloaded the enemy's storehouses. That's from a post by the 14th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces on Facebook.
According to the Ukrainian General Staff, since the beginning of the day, Ukrainian soldiers have repelled 4 attacks by Russian occupiers in the Kupiansk direction. 4 assaults were also repelled in the Lyman, Kramatorsk, and Orikhiv directions. Here, the soldiers highlight the excellent, well-coordinated teamwork between drone operators and artillery.
80% of artillery success depends on the crew's coordination, the accuracy of targeting, and the speed of loading the gun, so that enemy infantry can be effectively hit even as they approach our positions.
In addition, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, the enemy made 2 unsuccessful attempts to advance in the Dnipro River area. Ukrainian soldiers also repelled 3 Russian attacks each on the Huliapol and Kharkiv sections of the front, another 10 assaults in the Kursk region, and 8 more each in the Novopavlivka and Torets directions.
During the last operation, when we were being directed, they kept coming for more than a week. There was a concrete shelter nearby, which we had to flush them out of, and they kept getting reinforcements from time to time, which we successfully destroyed.
But Ukrainian soldiers repelled the most Russian attacks in the Pokrovsk direction. The Russian occupation army made 21 unsuccessful attempts to push Ukrainian defenders from their positions.
Their main goal right now is to wipe Pokrovsk off the map or surround it, basically for the same reason, to destroy our forces. They haven't been able to do that for months, and it's unlikely they'll succeed anytime soon unless they find some reserves somewhere. And where are the reserves? The reserves are up north right now, specifically in the Kursk direction and the Sumy direction. That's the group of forces that's trying to push out our units operating in the Kursk region, actually in 2 areas, one towards Sudza and the other in the area around Tyatkino. In the Tyatkino area, that's exactly where our defenders are having success. In fact, south of the same, the enemy's group of forces has been cut off. Basically, it's an operational encirclement.
They promise good, well-paid jobs, but then send them to the front lines. According to the British publication The Telegraph, that's exactly how Russia is luring Africans into fighting against Ukraine. Agents from Russia promise Africans jobs, but once they arrive, they are forced to sign contracts with the Russian army. Ukrainian soldiers have repeatedly shown captured Africans who surrendered. In addition, the partisan movement Atesh claims that employees of the so-called Military Commandant's Office of the self-proclaimed LNR are also being sent into these deadly assaults. The reason is a severe shortage of manpower at the front.
No training, no choice. People from the rear are thrown into the combat zone just to plug the gaps in the crumbling front line. This is yet another sign of the personnel and moral crisis in the Russian army and its puppet structures. From a report by the Atesh movement on Telegram.
Just in the past 24 hours, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukraine's defense forces have eliminated 970 Russian soldiers. Ukrainian troops also destroyed 4 Russian tanks, 11 armored combat vehicles, and 42 artillery systems. In addition, the defense forces struck 1 multiple rocket launcher system, shot down 167 operational tactical level drones, and blew up 123 units of Russian vehicles and fuel tankers.
June 10, 2025. I want to draw your attention to the date. It was another difficult night for Ukraine. Ukraine is under heavy shelling from Russian occupiers. This is how the night went. There are preliminary, yes, here, consequences, numbers about the consequences, and I will announce them. At least 4 people were injured. There are fires and destroyed homes. Last night, Russia launched attack drones and ballistic missiles at Kiev. At least 7 districts of the capital were affected. The information is still being clarified. Rescue workers continue clearing debris all over Kiev. Russia also struck a residential building in Odessa. According to preliminary data, 1 person was killed and 3 more were hospitalized.
Military analyst and former employee of the Security Service of Ukraine in 2004 and 2015, Ivan Stupik, is joining us. Ivan, welcome to Freedom.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to join us, Ivan. So, really, you just have to look at the news or the General Staff reports to see that, yes, the aggressor country is clearly set on a war of attrition. But what are Putin's goals here? What is he trying to achieve with this strategy?
It is, in principle, not surprising to understand that Ukraine will break down. Look, over the past month, or maybe a bit more, to be more accurate, unfortunately, we've seen shifts on the front lines that are not in Ukraine's favor, but rather in favor of the Russian Federation. Again, that's obvious. This is in the Sumy region, where as of now, almost 230 square kilometers are under the control of the Russian Federation. This is a breakthrough of our defenses, a setback, let's put it that way, a significant setback of our defenses between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka. And this gives, well, the collective Putin, and I don't mean just him, even though we usually just say Putin. Putin is a collective term. It includes the Kremlin and the military command of the Russian Federation, and this gives them not just restrained, but serious hopes, real optimism, that if they keep pressing for a while longer, then sooner or later, preferably sooner, from the Russian Federation's point of view, the Ukrainian defense will suffer a major setback, the front will seriously collapse, and after that, Ukraine will retreat on a large scale, abandon the Donetsk region, and then, I don't know. The Russian army will reach the Dnipropetrovsk region, approach the city of Sumy, and cut off the road that connects Sumy with the city of Kiev. In other words, everything will be completely different. I think that's the calculation. But, once again, we're not running a propaganda campaign here. Even though, as I said, there are setbacks on the Ukrainian fronts, the Russian army still hasn't made any significant advances or major breakthroughs so far. To say that, wow, there is such large-scale promotion there. Yeah, it's just, from one village to the next. Come on, the Russian army is the kind of army that used to think in terms of we'll walk to Warsaw on foot without a map and get to Berlin from memory. And now they're celebrating taking individual villages. My God, these are villages with only 200 or 300 people before the war, and they're losing dozens of pieces of equipment and hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers for them. Now that's the height of the Russian army's ambitions.
And at the same time, the Institute for the Study of War says that continued military aid to Ukraine from the West is a key element in implementing the strategy of putting pressure on the Russian Federation. So, as I understand it, for the Kremlin, the goal of this war of attrition isn't just to wear down and exhaust Ukraine's defenses, but also to bring about an end to Western support. How do our allies view this aspect of the situation?
Well, indeed, the Russian Federation would like the United States of America to stop supplying ammunition, to stop, well, ammunition and everything that goes along with it, to stop granting permission to third countries to supply Ukraine with such ammunition, Patriot systems, spare parts for tanks, and any other American equipment. And of course, it would also be desirable for the countries of Western Europe to all fall out with each other, for this coalition to collapse, and for Ukraine to be left completely alone, one-on-one with the Russian Federation. Along these same lines, we can immediately include those ultimatum-like demands that the Russian Federation voiced in Istanbul. It wasn't even a memorandum, once again, it was an ultimatum to immediately stop supplying military aid to Ukraine. Because, well, read between the lines, with this aid, we can't handle Ukraine, but as soon as the supplies stop, then we'll quickly deal with Ukraine. That's the kind of attitude they have, but what do we see when it comes to the US? The situation with the US isn't very pleasant, we have to admit that. Just a week or a week and a half ago, Pete Hegsted pulled back nearly 20,000 special detonators from being sent to Ukraine, enough for 20,000 missiles that we used to shoot down Russian Shahids. And these detonators were sent to the Middle East. Sorry. What's the point here? These detonators were planned, funded, and manufactured specifically for Ukraine. In other words, the United States of America deliberately chose to violate its contractual obligations. Once again, there was an agreement, there was an obligation. And here, they just went ahead and publicly broke it. We understand that with the US, at least with this administration, we can't make long-term plans, let alone get any security guarantees. We understand that perfectly well. Today they give, tomorrow they take it away with the other hand. But when it comes to European countries, it's a completely different story. There, we have very high hopes, and I'll explain why. Britain and France are ready to keep helping, they're ready to keep supplying ammunition and to develop production. For example, France. Renault is considering setting up drone manufacturing in Ukraine, which is exactly what Ukraine needs. And here, Germany deserves a special mention. Germany is the country that has radically changed its attitude toward this war, and has completely changed its approach to helping Ukraine. At first, as we've discussed many times, it was just 10,000 helmets for Ukraine and not a single helmet more, but now there's a discussion about Taurus missiles. I know for sure that this conversation is happening behind closed doors, and this issue is on the table. Another issue is that there are few of these missiles, the quantity is limited, and according to various estimates, it could take up to 6 months to train our soldiers to use them. Plus, things aren't going so well with aviation either. But there is some very, very good and optimistic news. Germany is seriously working on the issue of allowing Ukraine to independently produce its own missiles, ballistic and cruise missiles. This project, I know, has already been developed, is being implemented, and continues to improve. The idea is for Ukraine to have its own production, yes, with German components, possibly some German machinery, and this will significantly speed up the production of Ukrainian missiles and, I think, will have a major impact on what is happening on the front lines.